Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Slytherin earned its bad reputation long before Harry ever arrived at Hogwarts. Hagrid told him outright that it was the house that produced the foulest witches and wizards. And throughout the series, that prejudice never really went away. Gryffindors got the reputation for being brave and noble, while Slytherins were almost always portrayed as villains. Thankfully, there were exceptions, worthy Slytherins who shattered the stereotype. Let's remember their stories. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Severus Snape. Can Severus Snape really be called a good man? It's a question that has fascinated Harry Potter fans for years, and there may be no single, clear answer. Snape was cruel and vindictive. He hated Harry from day one, humiliating him at every turn while protecting his own favourites. As a young man, Snape was drawn to the dark arts and joined the Death Eaters. Yet he played a critical role in Voldemort's downfall. His love for Lily Potter made him a double agent, protecting Harry for years and feeding Dumbledore vital information. Snape fooled Voldemort himself and remained loyal to Dumbledore until the very end. While many readers could never forgive his cold, bitter personality, the constancy of his mission deserves respect. Despite his harshness and anger, he never wavered from his path. Number 2. Horace Slughorn. Half-Blood Prince is the only part of the saga where Professor Slughorn truly gets the spotlight. From his first appearance, he charms students with his charisma and his curious way of gathering promising young witches and wizards around him. He founded the Slug Club, inviting students he believed would make a mark on the wizarding world. Though selective, he treated his chosen favourites with genuine respect and interest. When the critical moment came, Slughorn showed real courage. He willingly gave Dumbledore the memory about Horcruxes, and during the Battle of Hogwarts, he stood and fought on the castle's side. Number 3. Regulus Black. Like all the Blacks, Regulus grew up absorbing pure-blood supremacist ideas. That belief led him to join the Death Eaters, but his loyalty to that ideology soon cracked. Though we don't know every detail, it's clear Regulus realized Voldemort wasn't a leader worth following. When he learned about the Horcrux, he and Kreacher broke into the cave and managed to steal Slytherin's locket. Tragically, Regulus didn't make it out, dragged under by a swarm of Inferi. Had he survived, the Order of the Phoenix might have gained a powerful ally. Number 4. Leta Lestrange. The Fantastic Beasts films received mixed reactions, and The Crimes of Grindelwald in particular was controversial, but that film gave audiences Leta Lestrange. At Hogwarts, Leta was friends with Newt Scamander, even though they were in different houses. They shared a sense of being outsiders who never truly fit in. Her true heroism emerged in adulthood. In the film's climax, Leta sacrificed herself willingly to buy time for Newt and his brother Theseus, to whom she was engaged. It was an act that felt more Gryffindor than Slytherin, bold and selfless rather than cunning and calculating. Number 5. Scorpius Malfoy. The Cursed Child was both a delight and a disappointment for fans. Though it continued the story in play form, it was full of oddities, canon-breaking twists, and controversial choices. But even with all its flaws, Scorpius Malfoy shone as a genuine bright spot. Unlike his father, he was kind, intelligent, and sensitive. His friendship with Albus Potter, also a Slytherin, was one of the best elements of the story. When time travel plunged the world into a nightmare under Voldemort's rule, Scorpius took the initiative and, with Severus Snape's help, restored everything. Remarkably, his gentle, sincere nature made him nothing like the typical caricature of a Slytherin. He was a character you truly wanted to root for. 6. Andromeda Tonks. Andromeda Tonks was born a Black. The name itself was a promise of cold purity and ancient power. Her sisters, Bellatrix and Narcissa, wore that promise like armor. But Andromeda turned away. She fell in love with Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard. When she married him, her mother burned her name from the family tapestry. Andromeda Black, traitor, the scorched hole seemed to say forever. She lost everything the Blacks valued: wealth, status, a place at the long dining table under the ancestral crest. But she gained something better, a family built on choice. She raised Nymphadora Tonks, the metamorph magus who would join the Order of the Phoenix. When the war came, Andromeda's home became a refuge. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat at her table, the scent of tea rising in the tense air. She asked no questions. She simply gave them shelter. Her husband and daughter died fighting Voldemort. Yet Andromeda did not break. She held her newborn grandson Teddy in her arms and promised him a better world. That was her rebellion. That was her heroism, not in duels or curses, but in choosing love over blood and safety over fear. Even in a family built on darkness, she lit a small, stubborn flame. 7. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa Malfoy stood in the clearing of the Forbidden Forest, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Voldemort's voice was thin and sharp. Is he dead? She stepped closer to Harry's motionless body. Her hand brushed his cheek. His skin was warm. She felt his pulse flutter. Alive. She could have screamed the truth, but another question burned through her fear. She bent low and whispered, "Draco, is he alive?" Harry's eyelids twitched. "Yes," he breathed. In that instant, she made her choice, not for Voldemort, not for the cause, for her son. Narcissa straightened and turned to the Dark Lord. Her voice was steady. "He is dead." A lie so perfect that no one doubted it. Around her, Death Eaters exhaled triumph. Only she knew she had just handed Harry Potter the chance to end this war. All her life, Narcissa had been taught that blood mattered most. The Malfoy name, the pure lineage, the silver and green banners of Slytherin. But when everything was stripped away, she was only a mother searching for her child. No cause was worth more than that. Not even survival. Later, when the castle walls cracked and Voldemort fell, Harry remembered her soft question. He would always know that Narcissa's lie had been the hinge on which everything turned. In the end, it wasn't a wand or prophecy that saved them. It was a mother's love, whispered in the dark. 8. Alecto Yaxley. Alecto Yaxley was a Death Eater. He strode through the Ministry of Magic with a sneer on his face and a dark mark on his arm. "Under the new regime," he would say, voiced like poisoned honey, "we do things properly." He watched Muggle-borns dragged before sham trials. No one would have guessed that the same man would one day help bring down Voldemort's last supporters. When the Dark Lord fell, chaos spread. Many Death Eaters vanished into the forests, hiding with stolen wands and false names. The Ministry was battered, short on auras, and desperate for leads. It was Yaxley who cracked first. He sat in a cold interrogation room and named them one by one: Rowell, Mulciber, Selwyn. "You want them?" he said, tapping his fingers on the table. "I'll give you everyone." Some said he only did it to save his own skin. Probably true. No one called him a hero. Kingsley Shacklebolt once spat, "He's a snake biting other snakes." But the arrests that followed were real. Carrow brothers in chains, Mulciber cornered in his ancestral manor, whole families forced to surrender. Yaxley's betrayal gutted the remnants of Voldemort's army. In the end, he wasn't noble. He wasn't sorry. But the truth he spilled helped close the wounds of war. Wizards and witches could walk the streets without fear of black robes and green light. Sometimes the path to peace runs through treachery, and even the cruelest Slytherin can help rebuild a broken world. 9. Phineas Nigellus Black. Phineas Nigellus Black never cared much for heroics. His portrait spent decades scolding the living from the safety of its golden frame. "Lazy children," he often sneered, rolling his painted eyes. He took pride in being called the least popular headmaster Hogwarts ever had. But when the Second Wizarding War swallowed the school, even Phineas had a part to play. His canvas hung in Grimmauld Place beside the severed heads of house elves. From there he listened. He carried messages between Dumbledore's army and Severus Snape. When Hermione stuffed his portrait into her enchanted bag, Phineas grumbled at the indignity. "You might at least treat me with respect," he snapped. Yet he never refused to report what he heard. It was Phineas who told Snape where Harry, Ron, and Hermione were camping in the frozen forests. That scrap of information let Snape slip the sword of Gryffindor into the lake, hidden inside a dough-shaped Patronus. "Take it," the silver animal seemed to say. And Harry did. The blade cut the locket Horcrux in two. Phineas's gossip saved them all. No one ever carved his name on a memorial. No statue of Phineas Nigellus stands in the courtyard. But without his sly cooperation, Voldemort's Horcruxes might have remained untouched. His heroism was as prickly and reluctant as he was, and it was real. 10 Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy stood on the astronomy tower, wand shaking in his hand. Dumbledore's voice was calm, almost kind. "Draco, you're not a killer." Tears burned Draco's eyes. He'd let the Death Eaters into the castle. He'd watched people fall, but he couldn't say the words. He couldn't cast Avada Kedavra. In that frozen moment he made a choice. He would not become what Voldemort wanted. He went home that summer with blood on his hands, but no kill on his soul. Lucius raged at him. Narcissa cried over him. Voldemort forced Draco to kneel at meetings, to watch tortures, to prove loyalty he didn't feel. "You will do as you're told," Voldemort hissed, fingers cold on his chin. Draco said nothing. He learned to survive by hiding the last scraps of himself deep inside. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Draco ran through the burning corridors, shouting for Crabbe and Goyle. When he saw Harry, Ron, and Hermione, he didn't attack. He didn't give them away. In Malfoy Manor, with Harry's face swollen and unrecognizable, Bellatrix shrieked, "Is it him?" Draco looked into Harry's eyes, heart pounding. "I can't be sure," he lied. That single moment of hesitation saved Harry's life. Years later, he watched his son Scorpius befriend Albus Potter. He didn't forbid it. He didn't warn him about blood or family pride. He just said, quietly, "Be better than I was." That was Draco's real victory, not a duel, not a dark mark burned away, just a father choosing to break the cycle. 11 Albus Severus Potter. Albus Severus Potter never expected the Sorting Hat to whisper Slytherin. He sat on the stool, feeling the weight of every eye in the great hall. Somewhere near the front, James Potter smirked. Rose Weasley looked politely surprised, but Albus only swallowed and nodded. Slytherin, he repeated to himself as if saying it aloud would make it feel less impossible. In that instant he broke 100 years of Potter tradition. At first he hated how the other students talked about him. "Harry Potter's boy, imagine he ended up with the snakes," they sneered. But Albus found an ally in the unlikeliest person, Scorpius Malfoy. Scorpius was quiet, gentle, nothing like the stories of his father. When they sat together in the library, Scorpius would whisper, "We're not them." And Albus believed it. Their friendship became the safest place he knew. Even when the world seemed determined to push them apart, they held on. When they discovered the time turner hidden in Delphi's plan, Albus felt a rush of power. He could change everything. He could save Cedric Diggory, heal old wounds, prove that he mattered. But each trip into the past twisted reality into something cruel. He watched Cedric humiliated, watched the world darken under Voldemort's return. At last, he stood beside Scorpius in the wreckage of the timeline and whispered, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." That confession was braver than any duel. His father's name might have been a burden. His house might have been a scandal, but when it counted, Albus chose honesty over pride. "It doesn't matter where you're sorted," Harry told him once, "only what you grow to be." And in the end, Albus grew into a boy with a Gryffindor's courage hidden beneath Slytherin green. 12. Cygnus Black III. Cygnus Black III never wore the mark. He never joined Voldemort's inner circle or forced his daughters to swear loyalty to the Dark Lord. Even in a house draped with the banners of pure blood supremacy, Cygnus drew an invisible line he would not cross. When Bellatrix began to obsess over Voldemort's cause, he tried to restrain her. He told her, "Family comes first. Be careful whom you serve." She only laughed and called him a coward. But that warning stayed buried in her mind long after she carved the dark mark into her skin. Many believed Cygnus was as cold as his brother Pollux, but he watched Andromeda slip away, choosing love over blood. He did not curse her in the street or send a curse after Ted Tonks. He did nothing to stop her either. His silence was his only rebellion. In the Black family tapestry, her name was burned away by Walburga's furious wand. Cygnus stood by, his eyes fixed on the empty space, and said nothing. Sometimes not acting is a choice louder than any declaration. He never spoke out against the pure blood mania that ruled his generation. But when the First Wizarding War came to their doorstep, Cygnus did everything he could to keep Narcissa and her young son out of the fighting. He told Lucius Malfoy, "Don't let your ambitions swallow your family." Lucius didn't listen. He stepped into Voldemort's shadow, dragging Narcissa with him. And yet Cygnus kept writing letters urging her to stay home and protect Draco. His voice was the last thread of caution tying her to safety. Years later, Narcissa would remember her father's measured words when she bent over Harry Potter in the Forbidden Forest. She lied to Voldemort's face to save her son. Perhaps that moment was the final echo of Cygnus's quiet resistance, proof that even in the darkest houses, someone can still choose to value life over blind devotion. 13. Merlin. Merlin was the first name every wizard child learned. His legend drifted through Hogwarts like candle smoke. Portraits spoke of him in hushed voices. "Merlin himself," they would whisper, "Slytherin's star pupil." It shocked many. How could the man who founded so many noble laws belong to the house of cunning and ambition? But Merlin's life proved that ambition could build as well as destroy. He wore the silver and green proudly. In his day, Slytherin was still new, the philosophy untested. Merlin embraced it fully. He believed magic was meant to be perfected. He believed knowledge was a gift to share. His closest friend was Sir Cadogan, a Gryffindor so reckless that Merlin often had to rescue him from his own duels. "Bravery without thought," Merlin teased him once, "is simply another way to die young." It was Merlin who wrote the earliest drafts of the charters of wand use. He argued that wizardkind had a duty to protect muggles, not dominate them. His greatest speech still appears in history books. Power is a trust. It is never truly yours. When the Wittenhagemot tried to crown him Archmage, he refused the title. He said no wizard should rule another by fear. But he was ambitious. He travelled farther than any sorcerer before him, collecting spells and stories. In Alexandria he studied ancient runes. In the deserts beyond Constantinople he bartered for a phoenix feather that never burned away. Those journeys were dangerous. He risked everything for wisdom. His cunning saved lives. When the mad warlock Vortigern tried to burn the Muggle villages of the West Country, Merlin used illusions to confuse the attackers. He created phantom armies and false fires. Vortigern's men fled in terror. Not a single villager died. Slytherin would have approved. At court, Merlin wore green robes, stitched with silver thread. When King Arthur asked him why he kept the Slytherin colours, he only smiled. "To remind myself that ambition is a blade," he said. "You must hold it by the hilt, or it will cut you to the bone." Even centuries later, wizards still swear by his name. "Merlin's beard," they cry when surprised, but few remember that the Order of Merlin First Class is awarded not just for valour, but for service to all magical creatures. That was his legacy, a vision that no one should be left behind. Dumbledore often quoted Merlin's writings. In the old man's study, a portrait of Merlin hung above the pensive. Sometimes Dumbledore would glance up and murmur, "We are none of us infallible," as if seeking counsel from the long-dead Slytherin sage. Merlin's life proved that greatness and darkness were not the same. His cunning made him wise, not cruel. His ambition built bridges, not prisons. And through every legend one truth endures. The House of Slytherin gave the wizarding world its first true hero. No one could deny that. Not even the ghosts who still haunt those stone corridors, whispering Merlin's name like a promise. 14 Salazar Slytherin at the start of his story. Salazar Slytherin's name became a curse long after he died. Children grew up hearing that he built the Chamber of Secrets, that he left behind a monster to kill those he called unworthy. But the first years of his life told a different story. He walked beside Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, and Rowena Ravenclaw as their equal. Together they raised Hogwarts from stone. He was the last of them to agree to build the castle. "Knowledge must be kept safe," he warned. "If we open our doors too wide, we risk losing everything." Rowena called him too cautious. Godric laughed and clapped him on the back. Helga only smiled and said, "Balance, Salazar, that is all." When the founders debated who should learn magic, Salazar spoke longest. He argued that children needed strength to survive. The wizarding world was not gentle. "We do them no kindness by pretending otherwise," he told the others. He believed magical bloodlines carried power that could not be taught, but in those early days he did not dream of purging Muggle-borns. He simply wanted Hogwarts to endure. He built the dungeons himself. He shaped the first lessons in defense in secrecy, in the delicate art of outsmarting an enemy before they ever raised a wand. Many of his students were orphans of war. He taught them to survive. When bandits tried to sack the castle in its second winter, it was Salazar who devised the traps that kept the attackers from breaching the walls. His cunning saved them again when plague swept through the highlands. Salazar sent scouts to bring potions from faraway alchemists. When others hesitated to trust outsiders, he said only, "We will not let children die for our pride." No one ever called him heartless then. Godric was his closest friend. For years they stood side by side in the Great Hall, arguing over everything and respecting each other all the same. They shared a belief that Hogwarts was more important than any one wizard. Rowena said it best, "Your quarrels are like the tide. They rise and fall, but the shore remains." The break came slowly. Salazar watched as more Muggle-born students arrived, some carrying tales of witch burnings and betrayal. He feared they would bring danger to the school's gates. He began to insist that only those of magical heritage could be trusted. Helga wept when he said it out loud. Godric clenched his jaw but stayed silent. The night he left, he did not scream or curse them. He walked the long corridor to the lake, where the moon shone on the water. No one followed. He turned back once and looked up at the castle he had built. "Protect them," he said softly, "even from themselves."
Many forget that line. They remember only the snake, the hidden chamber, the bitterness. But the man was more than the legend. His ambition had roots in love for the school. His caution was meant to shield the children he had sworn to teach. If his heart twisted in the end, it was not because Slytherin was evil. It was because fear grows fastest in those who care most. And Salazar Slytherin cared enough to build a refuge he could no longer trust himself to protect. 15 Blaise Zabini. Blaise Zabini always walked through the corridors as if the world owed him respect. His robes were immaculate, his chin lifted high. Even Draco Malfoy, who had no shortage of pride himself, once muttered, "He thinks he's better than everyone." And maybe he did, But, unlike many in Slytherin, Blaise never tried to prove it by picking sides in a war. His mother was infamous, a beautiful widow who had married 7 times, each husband dying and leaving her a fortune. Blaise inherited her sharp eyes and her instinct for self-preservation. When the Carrows began patrolling Hogwarts, he kept his distance. "It's all temporary," he told Daphne Greengrass in the common room. "When the Dark Lord falls, they'll all pretend this never happened." He never wore a silver mask, never whispered his name to Death Eaters. Some called him a coward. But Blaise preferred to think of himself as practical. He saw that Voldemort's promises were only traps dressed as triumph. He watched friends rush to swear allegiance, and he watched some never return.
At the Slug Club gatherings, Professor Slughorn would beam at Blaise and praise his excellent judgment. Slughorn knew better than most how dangerous ambition could be without caution. "Mr. Zabini," he said once, "will go far. He simply refuses to be anyone's pawn." During the Battle of Hogwarts, Blaise did not fight for either side. He slipped through the chaos like smoke. When Pansy Parkinson screeched that they should hand Harry over, Blaise did not echo her words. He folded his arms and waited. If the castle was going to fall, he would not be buried with it. Years later, people tried to decide whether he was a villain or a bystander, but no aura ever knocked on his door. No family ever named him as a tormentor. He emerged from the war untouched by any mark, free to build the life he chose. His greatest act of heroism was simple. He did not become another name on a list of the condemned. He did not add more darkness to the war. For a boy raised among serpents and shadows, that was no small feat. When Draco finally returned to Hogwarts with his son, he crossed paths with Blaise at a ministry gala. Draco asked, almost resentful, "And what did you do when everything fell apart?" Blaise just raised an eyebrow. "I survived," he said. Some would call that selfish, but survival is a quiet kind of courage. Blaise Zabini proved that Slytherin ambition did not have to end in ruin. It could be something measured, something that knew when to walk away. He never apologized for his choices. He never boasted either. He simply kept moving forward, a reminder that sometimes refusing to choose evil is its own quiet victory. 16. Millicent Bulstrode. Millicent Bulstrode was not known for her grace. She was broad-shouldered, strong, and blunt. In the dueling club, she lunged at Hermione Granger and nearly strangled her. "Watch it!" she barked as wands clattered to the floor. That moment stuck in people's minds, a Slytherin brute, nothing more. But not all battles were fought on polished floors. When Dolores Umbridge formed her inquisitorial squad, she invited all the usual suspects: Draco Malfoy, Pansy Parkinson, Vincent Crabbe. Their badges gleamed as they hunted Dumbledore's army. But Millicent didn't take one. She sat in the common room and watched them leave. She did not volunteer to drag her classmates to the office. Pansy once scoffed at her. Afraid of losing points? Millicent only shrugged. Not my problem. She had no taste for policing her friends. Even Snape noticed. During rounds, he asked her quietly why she wasn't helping Umbridge. "Don't fancy working for a toad," she muttered, avoiding his eyes. He didn't press. When the final battle erupted, the great hall filled with panic. The Slytherins were told to leave. Many ran. Some stayed behind to fight for Voldemort. But Millicent's name was never called among the Death Eaters. She was not seen in the courtyard cursing her teachers. She didn't raise her wand for the Dark Lord at all. Rumour said she slipped out of the castle and went home. Others claimed she hid in the dungeons with first years who were too scared to move. No one knew for certain. But the bodies in the Great Hall after the battle never included her. She made her choice. Later, people asked who the heroes were. They named Harry, Neville, Hermione. They forgot the ones who refused to become villains. Millicent never boasted. She never claimed to be better. She just didn't want to be a killer. Years after the war, in a small apothecary in Diagon Alley, Someone swore they saw her buying potions ingredients, older, calmer, quiet. When asked if she'd been at Hogwarts that night, she nodded once. "Didn't fight," she said. "Didn't fancy dying for a snake." That was all. No grand speech, no apology, just an honest truth. She didn't want blood on her hands, even when her house whispered that loyalty meant joining the winning side. Millicent Bulstrode was a Slytherin through and through. She was stubborn, she was proud, but she knew her own line in the sand. Sometimes heroism is loud, sometimes it is a boy with a scar raising his wand. Sometimes it is a girl who simply says, "No." The 17 Theodore Nott. Theodore Nott was a shadow in the back row of every classroom. He never raised his hand. He never bragged about bloodlines like Draco Malfoy or jeered with Pansy Parkinson. He listened. He measured. His silence made people nervous. "He's cleverer than he lets on," Professor Snape once said. Snape respected that about him. His father, Nott Senior, wore the dark mark. He had stood beside Voldemort in both wars. When the Aurors came for him after the Battle of Hogwarts, Theodore did not flinch. He watched the Ministry wizards lead his father away in chains. His face did not twist in shame or fury. It was as if he had always known this ending would come. That summer, rumours spread through Diagon Alley. Some whispered that Theodore would take revenge, that he would gather the children of Death Eaters and begin again. But nothing happened. He simply returned to Hogwarts. He climbed the steps to the Slytherin common room like any other student. He never tried to defend his father's name. Once, Vincent Crabbe sneered, "Your dad lost everything." Theodore looked up from his textbook. "So did yours," he said, voice flat as glass. Crabbe turned red but did not answer. Professor Slughorn tried to recruit him for the Slug Club. Theodore declined. He had no interest in fame or connections. "I'd rather not pretend," he said when Daphne Greengrass asked why. That was the heart of him. He refused to play games to please anyone. During the final year when Snape was headmaster, Theodore kept his distance. He never joined the Carrows patrols. He never dragged a single first year to detention. Even the Carrows seemed wary of him. He had a way of looking through people that made them uneasy. When the Battle of Hogwarts began, Theodore did not pick up a wand for Voldemort. He left the castle. Some called it cowardice, but he would have said it was clarity. He saw what war did to men like his father. He had no intention of becoming another ruin in a black robe. After the war, he inherited the Nott estate. Reporters hounded him, hungry for confessions or regrets. He offered none. When one asked whether he still believed in pure blood supremacy, he said only, "Belief is not the same as truth." He rebuilt his family's fortune quietly. He invested in apothecaries and wand law. He never joined the new ministry. He never stood on any platform to explain himself. Years later, Hermione Granger would tell her children, "Nott was the most curious of them all. He could have been our enemy, but he never was." Perhaps that was the real mark of his character. He never needed the world's approval. He never cared for anyone's permission to think for himself. Theodore Nott proved that a Slytherin could step away from a poisoned legacy and choose something better, not because it was easy, but because it was his. 18. Daphne Greengrass. Daphne Greengrass's name barely flickers in the pages of Harry's story. She was there at the Slytherin table, listening to the same lessons, watching the same battles of loyalty and pride unfold. But she was no Bellatrix, no Pansy, no shrieking chorus for blood purity. She stayed quiet, observant. After the war, Draco Malfoy was a changed man. The boy who had once spat at mudbloods learned the cost of his family's choices. When he chose Daphne Greengrass as his wife, it wasn't for status or bloodline alone. It was because she understood what it meant to start over. They married in the hush of post-war silence. The manor still smelled of ashes. Narcissa cried quietly at the ceremony, clutching Draco's hand. Lucius stared at the floor, remembering the Dark Lord's hiss in that same hall. Daphne stood beside Draco anyway. She didn't demand they erase the past. She demanded they never repeat it. When Draco snapped at house elves, Daphne told him, "They remember." He fell silent and apologized. Their home changed, softer, kinder. Together they had a son, Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy. No grand proclamations about the purity of his blood, no threats about family honor. When Hogwarts sorted Scorpius into Slytherin, Daphne wrote him a letter that said, "Be clever, but be good." Scorpius grew up gentle. He laughed too easily for a Malfoy. He made friends with Albus Potter, despite every whispered insult from those who remembered old wars. When people mocked him for his father's crimes, he chose to forgive. In The Cursed Child, Scorpius risks everything to fix a broken timeline. He says, "I didn't choose to be his son." But he chooses to be better. That choice was shaped in the quiet hallways of his home, where his mother taught him that past sins do not dictate the future. Daphne never stood on a battlefield. She did not duel Death Eaters, but she rebuilt something they had tried to destroy, a family unafraid to love, a house free of fear. She taught Draco to lay down old grudges. She taught Scorpius to see friends, not enemies, across the Great Hall. She unlearned generations of hatred. Hermione Granger once saw Daphne in Diagon Alley, holding Scorpius's hand. Their eyes met. No wands were drawn. No insults spat, just a nod. Two mothers choosing peace. Slytherin ambition can build walls or bridges. Daphne Greengrass chose bridges. She laid every brick with patience. In the end, her legacy was not a grand spell or a famous duel. It was a boy who learned to be kind in a world that had forgotten how. 19. Walburga Black. Walburga Black's portrait was famous for her shrieking. "Filth! Blood! Traitors!" she howled from behind the moth-eaten curtains in Grimmauld Place. Every time Sirius pulled them aside, she erupted like a volcano. To most, she was a madwoman frozen in oil. But she had once been a living witch, and her story was darker than the frame that trapped her. When Walburga was young, she learned that a Black never apologized. She married Orion Black because that was expected. She bore 2 sons, Regulus and Sirius, and taught them that blood was everything. "Better to die than be ordinary," she whispered to Regulus when he was small. But the world she believed in was crumbling. Muggleborns rose in the ministry. The old houses lost their power. Her husband died, leaving her alone in the great empty house. Walburga locked every door and hung protective charms over the silver heirlooms. She would not let thieves strip her family's name from the walls. Her grief curdled into bitterness. When Sirius ran away at 16, she burned his face off the family tree. "He is no son of mine," she said. Yet when she thought no one listened, she paced the corridor outside his old bedroom. She never forgave him for choosing James Potter over his own blood. But the rage came from fear as much as pride. In her mind, she was fighting for the survival of her house. In the end, it was the only war she believed she could win. Creature adored her. He repeated her slogans long after she was gone. Even when he served Harry, he still called her mistress. That devotion says something about her iron will. She had loved her family in a way as warped as it was absolute. When Regulus died retrieving Slytherin's locket, Walburga never learned the truth. She thought he died loyal to Voldemort. If she had known he died trying to destroy a Horcrux, perhaps her rage would have cracked at last. Her portrait stayed in Grimmauld Place after Sirius's death. When Harry inherited the house, he tried to rip it from the wall, but the frame was enchanted too well. Even in death, Walburga refused to surrender her post. Hermione once said, "She was awful, but she was also a prisoner." It was true. Trapped in her portrait, she could never see how small her world had become. There is no denying she was cruel, no denying she worshipped an ideology that destroyed her children, But there was also a grim loyalty in her, a desperate refusal to let go of her name, her house, her history. Sometimes villainy and tragedy are the same story. Walburga Black showed what happens when love for one's family rots into hatred for everyone else. Even the loudest monsters in Slytherin were human once, and sometimes that is the saddest truth of all. 20. Abraxas Malfoy. Abraxas Malfoy was a name spoken carefully in pure-blood drawing rooms. He never shouted. He never made dramatic speeches about blood purity like Bellatrix Lestrange. He preferred the hush of private deals, the polite smile that meant you would regret crossing him. His enemies called him cold. His friends called him prudent. When Voldemort first rose to power, Abraxas watched. He hosted gatherings in Malfoy Manor, listening to the promises of a new, wizarding order. But he did not tattoo his loyalty onto his arm. "We will see," he told Lucius. That was the Malfoy way. Never commit until the winning side was clear. His caution preserved the family. When the First War ended and Aurors hunted Death Eaters, Malfoy Manor remained untouched. Lucius testified that he had been imperious. Abraxas arranged the meetings with ministry officials. He poured the tea. He ensured the Malfoy vault stayed full. He understood that power was a dance. When Barty Crouch Senior snarled about hunting down Voldemort's allies, Abraxas sent him gifts. He wrote letters heavy with regret. "We had no choice," he insisted, and Crouch, ever the political man, nodded grimly. Abraxas taught Lucius the same lessons. "Power," he said, "is the art of survival, nothing more." Lucius would remember those words even as he bowed to Voldemort decades later, hoping to survive that second wave of terror. He never made himself a hero. He never tried to fight the Dark Lord, but he refused to make the Malfoy name a martyr's epitaph on the walls of the ministry's courtrooms. When rumours spread that Abraxas had died of dragonpox, some said it was punishment for his dealings. Others said it was simply old age, but the family he left behind was intact, wealthy, respected, even if many whispered about the price of that security. Draco grew up in the shadow of that legacy. He learned the rules of that same game. Smile at your enemy, apologize with gold, never show your throat unless you have a knife behind your back. Harry once asked Draco if his grandfather had been a Death Eater. Draco's jaw tightened. He was smarter than that, he said. He didn't elaborate. When the Second War ended, the Malfoys again claimed ignorance and fear. Again they paid reparations instead of serving sentences in Azkaban. The blueprint was Abraxas's. Many would call it cowardice. But to Abraxas it was loyalty, not to Voldemort, not to any ideology, to his family. He was a Slytherin through and through, and his brand of heroism was this, making sure the Malfoys survived the storm, no matter which way the wind blew. 21. Selwyn, not to be confused with the Death Eater family name. Selwyn's name echoed through many stories. In the Second Wizarding War, it belonged to a Death Eater whose allegiance was to terror. But there was another Selwyn, almost forgotten, who proved a Slytherin could choose a different path. He walked Hogwarts corridors in the late 1800s, his green and silver robes always perfectly pressed. He came from the same ancient line, pure-blooded and proud. Yet ambition drove him not toward dark causes, but toward the ministry's most dangerous office. "Aura," he told his friends in the Slytherin common room, "that is where the real power lies, and the real purpose." Some thought he was bluffing. After all, Slytherins were known for politics, not fieldwork. But Selwyn trained harder than any Gryffindor. He mastered concealment charms, silent curses, the art of interrogation. His professors took notice. "Focused," Professor Binns once murmured, "a mind suited for strategy." When he left Hogwarts, he passed the Aura entrance trials on his first attempt. His application stated simply, to protect Wizarding Britain from all threats, within and without. It was ambition, yes, but ambition directed at something larger than himself. Selwyn hunted dark wizards in the north, where the hills were steep and the nights endless. He tracked a werewolf pack to an abandoned abbey and waited 3 days without sleep for the right moment to strike. His reports were crisp and unemotional. He never boasted. Once, an old schoolmate asked whether he feared becoming like the enemies he pursued. Selwyn only smiled. "Slytherins are cautious," he said. "That is why we survive. But some things are worth risking everything." He understood better than anyone that corruption could bloom anywhere, even in the ministry itself. He gathered evidence against a senior official who had been selling Auro intelligence to dark families. It nearly cost him his career, but when the trial came, he testified without hesitation. In the record of that hearing, his words remain clear. Loyalty to the law is not the same as loyalty to any one master. It was the heart of who he was. A Slytherin who believed rules were not made to be broken, but to protect the innocent. He never married. He left no children. But the Aura office still keeps a portrait of him in the Hall of Records. New recruits are told Selwyn of Slytherin proved cunning can serve justice. His legacy is quiet compared to the famous duelists and war heroes, but it is no less valuable. He showed that a Slytherin's ambition could be a shield instead of a dagger. When people speak of the Selwyn name, they often forget this man ever existed, but in the Ministry's hidden archives he remains a symbol of what Slytherin can be when it refuses the easy road to power. And that may be the finest lesson of all. 22. Thomas Riddle Senior, before Merup's enchantment. Tom Riddle Senior was no wizard. He was a wealthy muggle who rode his horse through the muddy lanes near Little Hangleton with polished boots and a sneer for anyone poorer than himself. Arrogant, the villagers called him. He laughed at superstition. He dismissed the old stories of curses that clung to the gaunt shack. But there was one person who watched him with dark, hungry eyes. Marvolo Gaunt, shivering in the ruins of her family's faded grandeur. She loved him in a way that turned poisonous. When he passed on horseback, she clutched the rotting windowsill and whispered his name. One day he noticed her. She smiled, shy and strange, but it was no charm that won him. It was a potion. A love potion slipped into his drink. In that moment, Tom Riddle Senior lost every ounce of will. He did not choose to love Merope. He simply obeyed. They fled the village together, leaving scandal behind them. Merope wore her hair brushed smooth for the first time. She called him darling and dreamed of a happy home. But all of it was built on false magic. Tom Riddle Senior was trapped in a lie. When Merope grew weary of the deception, she stopped giving him the potion. She thought love would remain. Instead, he woke up beside a witch he didn't know in a house he hated. He fled in horror and rage, leaving her penniless and pregnant. The villagers gossiped about the scandal. They said he was cruel, abandoning his wife. But they did not see the truth. He had been robbed of choice. He had been a prisoner. His sin was arrogance. His punishment was being used. Years later, his son would murder him without mercy. Tom Marvolo Riddle, the boy born from obsession and dark magic, would stand in that same drawing room and kill his muggle father. No words, no forgiveness, just the green flash of the killing curse. Dumbledore told Harry the story in a hushed office. He was a handsome, snobbish boy, Dumbledore said of Riddle Senior, but a no-murderer. He was the victim of a broken heart turned desperate and twisted. Tom Riddle Senior never understood the world he brushed against. He never knew about Parseltongue or Gaunt's ring with the Peveril mark. He didn't care about blood purity or magical lineage. He just wanted to live as he pleased. But Slytherin's legacy caught him anyway. His death was written the moment Merope decided to make him love her. He became the unwilling father of the darkest wizard in history. Even the blackest stories have innocent blood on their pages. Sometimes Slytherin's darkness isn't about cruelty chosen, but about tragedy forced. Tom Riddle Senior remains proof that the line between villain and victim can vanish when magic takes away what matters most: choice. 23 Marvolo Gaunt, complex but instructive. Marvolo Gaunt lived in a shack that smelled of rotting straw and old rage. He clutched a ring engraved with the Peveril crest, proof he was Slytherin's last true heir. To him, that ring mattered more than food, more than kindness, more than his children. When Dumbledore visited, he found Marvolo snarling at the world, convinced that everyone envied his bloodline. "I'm a Gaunt," he spat. "We're pure. You think you can take that from me?" His voice shook with something that sounded almost like fear. But once, Marvolo had been young. At Hogwarts he showed promise. He understood Parseltongue better than any in his generation. His professors thought he might become a historian or a master of magical lore. He could have rebuilt the Gaunt name into something more than a legend of decay. Instead, he let his pride consume him. He refused to adapt. When the wizarding world changed, he refused to accept that his family's power was slipping away. Every disappointment turned into hatred. Every slight became a reason to hurt the people closest to him. His daughter, Merope, lived like a prisoner in her own home. His son, Morphin, inherited only the violence. And yet, Marvolo believed he was preserving something noble. "Better dead than tainted," he would say, gripping that ring as if it were a talisman against time itself. The ministry arrested him after he attacked Ogden, the official who tried to protect Merope. Even in chains, Marvolo never admitted he was wrong. "You'll regret crossing a Gaunt," he sneered as they dragged him away. But the truth was he had already destroyed his legacy long before that day. When he died in Azkaban, no one mourned. His house collapsed in on itself. His children vanished into darker tragedies. Dumbledore once told Harry, "You will find that Voldemort's family was a study in self-destruction." It began with Marvolo, who mistook cruelty for strength and obsession for purpose. His story is a warning more than anything else, that even the proudest Slytherin can become a ruin if he forgets that ambition must be guided by something better than fear. Marvolo's heroism, if it can be called that, lies only in this. He shows every Slytherin what happens when you let your inheritance turn into a prison. He never lifted a wand in defense of the innocent. He never protected his own children. But by failing so completely, he left behind an example no one could ignore. Sometimes the darkest figures teach the clearest lessons. Marvolo Gaunt's life is proof that legacy alone is never enough. Without compassion, it rots into madness. 24. Lizzy Barrow, Game and Book Canon. Lizzy Barrow's name flickers through the old Hogwarts records like a candle in the dark. A Slytherin of the late 1800s, she was not the sort to boast about blood or sneer at Muggleborns. She had sharper ambitions. She wanted to master every charm and potion that could save a friend's life. Professors noted her for her questions. "How can we make this safer?" she'd ask during dangerous transfiguration drills. She refused to accept that power meant recklessness. In the potions dungeon she stayed late, adjusting recipes for better healing drafts. When a magical creature broke loose during care of magical creatures, it was Lizzy who calmed it, whispering spells so subtle they didn't even flash. "No need to frighten it," she told her classmates, rolling her eyes when someone praised her bravery. She built alliances carefully. Ravenclaws respected her logic. Hufflepuffs liked her directness. Even the Gryffindors, wary of Slytherins, found themselves working alongside her in dueling practice. She was competitive, yes, but fair. She did not cheat. She planned. Lizzy had no patience for bigotry. When another Slytherin made a joke about Muggleborns, she turned and said evenly, "Try that again, and you'll test your own sticking charm on the ceiling." The joke died in his throat. In the game's expanded lore, players hear stories of Lizzy helping track a cursed artifact to a remote cave. She didn't want the glory, she wanted it contained. She organized the map work and the protective spells. She made sure no one got hurt. Headmaster Black once called her unsettlingly competent. He didn't mean it as a compliment. She smiled anyway. Slytherins didn't need approval. They needed results. Her friends trusted her in a crisis. "Lizzy will know what to do," they'd say, gathering around her as the plan formed. She never panicked. She saw all the angles. Even after Hogwarts, she worked in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. She was the one who negotiated with panicking bystanders, who planned the safe disarming of hexed relics. She always insisted on clear evacuation routes. Some said she lacked warmth. But Lizzy would risk her neck for you without asking for thanks. She believed that if you cared for someone, you protected them the best way you could. Her ambition was never about personal glory. It was about ensuring that people survived the worst the magical world could throw at them. Lizzy Barrow is a Slytherin who proved that cunning can be a promise. I will think ahead. I will be ready. I will keep you safe. 25. Hector Dagworth-Granger. Hector Dagworth-Granger signed every letter with a flourish. He liked his name spelled in gold ink across the top of every journal. Some said he was arrogant. Some said he was brilliant. Both were true. He was born to an old Slytherin family that prized tradition above all. But Hector cared more about discovery than decorum. He spent hours in the dungeons experimenting with cauldrons that hissed and spat fumes across the flagstones. When he was still a student, he created a potion that healed cursed frostbite faster than any existing salve. He called it Frostbane Elixir. Slughorn would later claim it was the reason he started the Slug Club, so talent like Hector's never went unnoticed. Hector never denied that he liked recognition. "Prestige is the best incentive," he once told a skeptical Hufflepuff. "If people admire you, they'll listen when you need them to." But behind that polished smile was a mind working to solve real problems. His greatest achievement was the development of a stabilizing agent that made Wolfsbane potion practical. Before that, the brew was so volatile that many healers refused to attempt it. Hector tested dozens of ingredients, nearly poisoning himself more than once. When he succeeded, he sent his formula to St. Mungo's without charging a nut. Innovation, he said, should be shared before it's sold. He kept meticulous notes in leather-bound ledgers. Future generations of potioneers would study those pages, tracing his neat handwriting as if it were scripture. His ambition was never small. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted his name on the lips of every healer in Britain. But he also wanted fewer witches and wizards to suffer. That combination made him dangerous and indispensable. He founded the Club of Slugs, what would become the Slug Club, because he believed that excellence deserved to be nurtured. Some thought it was just another way to preen, but Hector personally mentored dozens of students who went on to invent life-saving potions. One of them, a young witch named Belvina Stroud, wrote later, "He taught me that pride is not the same as selfishness." During the Great Blight, when a magical disease swept through the lowlands, Hector closed his laboratory to all visitors. He worked for weeks without sleep, searching for an antidote. When he finally emerged, gaunt and triumphant, he held a vial of shimmering liquid that would save thousands. "Distribute it freely," he told the ministry official who came to collect it. "And remember which house made this possible." He never let anyone forget that he was a Slytherin. He wore green robes with silver embroidery. He claimed it kept his mind clear. His critics called him vain. They weren't wrong. But even they admitted he left wizarding medicine forever changed. At his funeral, Slughorn gave the eulogy. He said, "Hector believed that ambition and compassion were not enemies. He proved it every day. The Club of Slugs sent wreaths from every corner of Europe. Even rival potioneers paid their respects, because for all his pride, Hector Dagworth-Granger had given them hope. To this day, students in the Slytherin common room still repeat his most famous line, "If you have the skill to change the world, you have the duty to try." His legacy is more than recipes and awards. It's the reminder that heroism can be brewed in cauldrons, measured in drams, and poured into glass vials that save lives. Hector's story proves that Slytherin ambition, when wedded to purpose, can heal instead of harm, and that sometimes the most powerful magic is simply refusing to accept what everyone else says is impossible. 26. Maria Black Family Tree History. Maria Black's name is little more than a fading line on the Black family tree. No grand story survives, no portrait glowers in Grimmauld Place, just a birth date, scorched out so violently that the parchment curls at the edges. It's easy to skip over her, most people do, but look closely at that burn mark. It's not a mistake, it's a verdict. In the House of Black, they didn't erase names lightly. To be removed meant only one thing, betrayal. And betrayal in that house usually meant compassion. We don't know if Maria fell in love with a muggle. Maybe she married a wizard the family despised. Maybe she refused to denounce muggle-born friends, no record says. But the Black family's code was clear. Toujours pur was not just a motto. It was a prison. Imagine the night her name was burned away. Walburga's mother, one tip, glowing red-hot, pressing it to the family tapestry, while the others watched. No tears, just the sharp scent of scorched fabric and finality. She is no daughter of this house. Sirius once told Harry, "My mother was obsessed with blood purity." That obsession didn't start with her. It went back generations. Maria would have known that before she made her choice. If she chose love over lineage, it wasn't ignorance, it was defiance. She would have known exactly what it cost. The loss of her home, her inheritance, her name. She wouldn't have been the first. The Black family tree is riddled with burn marks, names like Cedrella Black, who married Septimus Weasley, Alphard Black, who gave gold to Sirius when he ran away. Each mark tells the same story. Someone who said no. Maria's mark is the quietest of them all. No explanation, no scandalous letters preserved in the attic, just silence. But silence can be its own kind of courage, because in the world of the Blacks, where purity was everything, even a whisper of dissent was dangerous. And Maria didn't just whisper, she vanished so thoroughly she became a ghost on the family tree. Imagine the years after she was erased. Did she have children who grew up without knowing they had black blood? Did she keep her wand in a drawer, telling stories of Hogwarts only when it was safe? Or did she fight in quiet ways, hiding Muggle-born families when anti-Muggle laws were passed, brewing potions for those who couldn't afford them, teaching charms to those denied a wand? Her family would call that treachery. Others might call it heroism. The truth is, we don't know, but that blank space where her name once was burns brighter than any golden thread on that tapestry. It's a testament that even in the most rigid bloodlines there were hearts willing to break the rules. It's easy to see the Blacks as villains, Bellatrix with her feverish loyalty, Walburga screaming from her frame, but there were always those who didn't fit, those who refused. Maria Black is their symbol. Proof that no family, no matter how dark its traditions, is without its rebels. She may have died forgotten by her kin, but the very act of erasing her preserved her choice forever. Every glance at that scorch mark asks the same question. What did she refuse to become? That's the lesson she left behind, that Slytherin ambition can turn on its own roots and say enough, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And in the end, that burn on the tapestry isn't a stain, it's a scar, a reminder that even the purest bloodlines can bleed. In the end, the story of Slytherin House is not a single tale, but a tapestry stitched from 1,000 contradictions. If you stand in the dungeon common room and run your hand across the stones, you will not just feel the chill of the lake pressing in. You will feel all the lives that shaped the house's name, some bright, some terrible, some quietly defiant. They will tell you that heroism does not always wear red and gold. Sometimes it wears green, tempered by doubt and compromise. Sometimes it is as simple as opening your door to the hunted, as difficult as refusing to pass judgment, as radical as loving a child more than a creed. The next time someone claims Slytherin is only darkness, remember Maria Black, whose blank space shames every bigot. Remember Hector, who brewed salvation in a cauldron. Remember Narcissa, who lied to save a life. Remember Merlin, who stood before kings and spoke for the powerless. Their stories are a testament to what happens when ambition meets conscience, when cunning chooses compassion, when the will to survive becomes the will to protect. No house is without shadows, but no house is without light. And Slytherin, more than any other, holds both in its coils, waiting for those brave enough to decide which to embrace.